Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Well, here we go again. It's the end of the week, which means it's time to look at how the market has changed week over week. And again, we're going to be looking at capacity, volumes, how many loads are getting rejected by contract carriers, diesel prices, and then we'll go into specifics for dry vans, reefers, and flatbeds as we look at the spot market conditions. Now, it's definitely a frustrating time right now, but there are some good news this week. So let's chat about it. Ready? Let's go. All right, I got a tad bit cold, which is why I'm borrowing my son's jacket. Hopefully he doesn't mind when he watches this video. But let's start with the net changes in carrier population. So as of last Friday, we lost an additional 115 carriers net. Now let's take a look at volumes. Again, as a reminder, the white line is us in 2024. The blue line is 2023. We are still above the 2023 levels, and currently there is an uptick in volume. Now it is really following the 2023 pattern in general. So I'm hoping to see volumes continue to increase and remain above those 2023 levels. Again, there's not really an issue with volumes. There's an issue with capacity. So let's take a look at rejection rates. So again, white line 2024, blue line 2023. As you can see, last week we had a huge drop in tender rejections. It was a disaster, but now they are on their way up again. But currently rejection levels are at 3.37%, which means out of the contract market, only 3.37% of the loads from the contract side are ending up on the spot market or trickling down to the spot market. Very, very low number. Now, I promised you guys some good news in this video, and the good news comes in the form of diesel prices today. So as you can see, diesel prices have been on their way down, and finally they are below the $4 per gallon mark, specifically $3.99 per gallon on a national level. But this is super important because, again, diesel prices are one of the biggest expenses of any trucking operation. All right, now on to specifics. And usually I show the spot market volumes and spot market rates for each equipment type, but for some reason, something is happening to FTR's PDF files. They are just not downloading. So we'll go through it in a different way. So these are the spot rates, but more specifically, this is for dry van. We can see the rate per mile. Again, this is according to FTR. Rate per mile last week was $1.83 per mile. Rate per mile this week is $1.87 per mile on average for dry vans. So it's an increase of 4 cents per mile, which is good. Now, rates year over year also increased by 2%. So if we're comparing this week for dry vans compared to the same week last year, it's up by 2%. But over the 5-year average, it's down by 8%. In terms of volumes week over week for dry vans on the spot market are up 5.8%, but year over year they're down 4%, and over the 5 years they're down 33%. So the question is, where do you need to go to grab relatively better opportunities? And as always, we look at these two maps by sonar, where we have the rejection rates and we have the volumes, and we're trying to pair the two. So let's start with the volumes, and I'll tell you the top 5 states with the highest volumes for dry vans in the general market. Number 1, we have Dallas, Texas. Number 2, we have Detroit, Michigan. Number 3, Atlanta, Georgia. Then we have Ontario, California, and then finally Houston, Texas. Now, in terms of the market areas which have the highest rejection levels, meaning that the contract carriers are just refusing to haul loads, number 1 is Cedar Rapids, Iowa, rejection of 15.79%. Number 2, Dubuque, Iowa, which is 13.11%. Number 3, Rapid City, South Dakota, which is 12.82%. Number 4 is Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is 12.45%. And finally, Des Moines, Iowa, where the rejection is 12.19%. But this doesn't mean that these are the best markets. Again, we need to compare volumes and rejections together to figure out where is the most volume trickling down to the spot market. So those areas are starred right here. Number 1, Dallas, Texas for dry vans. Number 2, it's Atlanta, Georgia. Then we have Ontario, California. Then Los Angeles, California. And finally, Green Bay, Wisconsin. Now let's talk about what's happening with reefers. We have the spot rates, but let's look at the table, right? These are going to be attached down below, by the way. So last week, the rate per mile was $2.22 on average on the spot market. This week, $2.38, an increase of 16 cents week over week. Now, year over year, 3% increase. It's actually one of the biggest increases in reefer rates week over week from what I read on FTR. Now, of course, over the last 5 years, rates are down 5% for reefers. Volumes week over week are up 10.8% on the spot market, but year over year, they're down 5%. And over a 5-year period, reefer volumes are down 34% on the spot market. So again, what is the best place to stick to if you have a reefer right now? So again, these two maps by Sonar, and let's start with looking at the 5 highest volume markets. So number 1 is actually Joplin, Missouri. Number 2 is Lakeland, Florida. Number 3 is Allentown, Pennsylvania. Then we have Fort Worth, Texas. And finally, Atlanta, Georgia. Now, something to note, according to Sonar's data, pretty much all of these markets, with the exception of Fort Worth, declined in volume week over week. Now, what about those rejection markets? Which ones are the highest? So first place is actually Little Rock, Arkansas, where the rejection is 19.43%. Then we have Memphis, Tennessee, which is right next to it, 16.56%. Spokane, Washington, which is 16.13%. Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which has a rejection of 14.63%. And Quincy, Illinois, which has a rejection of 14.57%. So which markets actually have more loads trickling down to the spot market? Well, number 1 is Fort Worth, Texas. Number 2 is Ontario, California. Number 3, Joplin, Missouri. Number 4 is actually Lakeland, Florida. And number 5 is Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, be careful as well. Even though the volume trickles down in higher numbers in these areas, you also have to be very aware of what is happening to supply and demand on the spot market, how much capacity there is in each of these areas. All right, finally, we have flatbeds, and these are the spot rates, but let's take a look at the table using FTR's data. So rate per mile last week on the spot market for flatbeds was $2.45. This week, $2.43. So a decrease by about 1.4 cents week over week. Now, year over year, rates decreased 5% for flatbeds. And over 5 years, also it decreased 5% for flatbeds. Volumes week over week for flatbeds actually increased 2.3%, and year over year as well by 4%. But over the past 5 years, flatbed volumes on the spot market decreased by 37%. So again, as a reminder, I do not have those really cool sonar maps for flatbeds. They do not have that data, but I do make my own using truck stop data. So let's take a look at load volumes first on the spot market. The darker an area, the more loads there are in that area. And you can see not much has changed. It's still the southern states that have more volumes for flatbeds, whereas the northern and especially the plain states, this is where you're not really going to find a ton of volume. What about truck capacity on the spot market? Well, the lighter an area is, like Oregon or the Northeast, the less trucks there are in that market. The darker it is, the more trucks. And we can see most of the trucks are trying to keep to the southern states and to the eastern and midwestern states for the most part. But of course, the most important question is those load to truck ratios, the comparison of how many loads there are compared to how many trucks are willing to move those loads. Let's take a look. So red means that there is less than 1 load per truck. Beige, like this, means about 1 load. Yellow, which is only Arkansas, 2 loads per truck. And green means over 3 loads per truck. First thing I realized is the only places where there is over 1 load or more per truck is kind of the South, right? As well as California and Oregon. Oregon doesn't really count though, because everyone's deadheading from Washington here. Another thing I noticed is that the market for flatbeds became even more scarce. There are less places where you can have more negotiating power, right? Now, something to remember is that even if a state is red, like for example, Nevada, right? Out of Sparks, Nevada, you can usually get a really, really good rate going somewhere in the West Coast. But the problem is that everywhere else, it's going to pay like crap. The only 3 safe markets at the moment is Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, all of which have over 3 loads per truck. So again, I am super happy to see that diesel prices have made significant downward movements as of late, because as we all know, fuel is one of the biggest expenses of any trucking company. However, the market in general, in and of itself, leaves much to be desired, although there were some positive movements for both reefers and dry vans over the past week on the spot market. Now, some of you say that the current market can be explained by the fact that there's an election coming up. Others say that this is the new normal. Some say this is the product of what happened with COVID. Everyone has a ton of different opinions. Now, after I made my last video where I showed you my business partner operated truck numbers, I got a ton of mixed reactions. And honestly, the point was to show how much the market has deteriorated over the past year. But some people took it differently, which is why I got a crap ton of emails asking me if this is a good time to get into this industry. So I decided to answer this question in my next video, which is also where I'm going to share an amazing tool I found, which is free for anyone to use. And this calculator is incredible, especially for people who are on the actual trucking side of the industry. We will finally close the debate of whether it's a good time to get into this industry right now. And we will talk about what do you do if you're already stuck in this swamp. So keep an eye out for that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you have a fantastic end of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.